Welcome to Retail Crime Uncovered, the go-to podcast for anything and everything retail crime related. I'm your host, Professor Emmeline Taylor. If there's one thing that I love, it's people working together to tackle shared concerns, and that's absolutely what we need in terms of retail crime. And today I'm joined by a US retail crime legend, Lisa LaBruno. She's the Senior Executive Vice President at RILA, the Retail Industry Leaders Association. And I talked to her about the trends that are happening over in the US. We quite often look over the pond to see what's happening there as a foreteller of some of the things that might then be seen in other locations. So we talked about the Inform Act legislation that came into being in June of this year that requires online marketplaces to verify the identification of bulk sellers and the impact that that might have. And about the new Vibrant Communities campaign that Lisa has been spearheading. So there's certainly a lot happening in the US that I think other countries can learn a lot from. So why not pour yourself a little glass of optimism and buckle in? So we're hearing a lot about organised retail crime in England. We're hearing it across Europe, and we're certainly hearing about it coming out of the USA. And people are looking on really quite nervously what's happening there. So what are your members reporting in terms of organised retail crime?
They're reporting increased losses across the board, increased violence by organized retail crime members against associates. We're seeing more product locked up than ever before. In fact, Emmeline, we recently commissioned a survey with our members, and 52% of the respondents said that external theft has increased significantly in the past year, and 45% have said that it's increased over the past year. So 97% of our survey respondents have reported an increase in the frequency with which organized retail crime gangs are hitting their stores, the losses that are being incurred by retailers.
And some of the videos that I've seen online, the level of violence that is being used and just how brazen some of these offenders are just really feels like there's been a step change in recent times. Is that the case?
Yeah, look, currently organized retail crime is a rather low risk, high reward activity. Mm-hmm. And we are trying very diligently at RILA in partnership with our retailer members, prosecutors, law enforcement. We are trying to reverse that to make it a low reward, high risk endeavor. Mm-hmm. Right now, there's this feeling that there's a lack of accountability for a whole host of reasons. And for reasons we can get into, I'm supremely optimistic that we can reverse that with some of the work that we're doing. And so, yeah, they're becoming more violent because they believe that they're going to get away with it. And there's just, an impression out there that by these criminal actors that they can essentially do whatever they want. And get away with it because there's little accountability.
Wow. Okay. I mean, that's a scary place to be, isn't it? Where you've got offenders who are acting with, they feel they've got impunity, that there's no consequences to their actions.
The environment is a very difficult one, particularly for the employees in the stores. Those are the folks that are encountering these criminal actors. They are the ones on the receiving end of the violence, whether it's being pepper sprayed, sucker punched, knifed, and in some of the most egregious cases tragically killed all over a widget that the criminal actor is bent on stealing. And so, this level of theft and violence, it's not only victimizing the employees in the stores, but, it can be a morale killer too, right? And, it's an unsafe environment out there, and retailers will always put the safety of their people first. And so they're reluctant to empower their associates, particularly those who are not in asset protection loss prevention, to engage these criminal actors. And it's really difficult. I mean, imagine, Emmeline, you're a frontline worker in an apparel store, and several criminal actors come in and wipe your shelves clean and leave. And there's little you can do because you're not equipped to engage those criminals. And there's no telling what level of violence those criminals will use against you. And so the frontline retail workers have been placed in a really tough position, they're vested in their stores and they're vested in their legitimate customers. And to have to watch as criminals come in and take whatever they feel like taking, it's a tough situation. There are a number of studies out there, and they all suggest that the problem is in the billions of dollars. Every retailer we work with, everyone, has said that the problem has gotten worse over the past 5 years. It is a huge number, but there's impact beyond dollars and cents. The violence against associates, retailers closing stores because they can't keep product on their shelves and they can't keep their employees safe. So they simply can't afford to keep their stores open. And, what's the impact of that? How do you measure that? Jobs lost. Communities can't get the products that they need when they need it. Vacant storefronts. I mean, Emmeline, as a criminal researcher, vacant storefronts are fodder for criminal activity. They're not good for communities, right? And then you've got the nexus between organized retail crime and other really serious criminal activity: child exploitation, labor trafficking, drug and weapon trafficking. So the costs are significant, but they're not just borne by the retailers. The costs are borne by the employees who are put in harm's way, the communities that can't get goods, essential product when they need it. The victims of the other criminal activity that's connected to ORC. And so, the detractors out there, the ones who want to sort of seize on the fact that we haven't agreed on one number, they need to understand how big this problem is, because it's much more than just a single dollar figure.
It's such a powerful image that you present, that what we're seeing in stores is simply just the tip of the iceberg. And as you say, some of these criminal gangs are linked into so many unsavory activity, and the scale of it, once you start to, scratch beneath the surface, is really, it is just so devastating for communities. And just in terms of the level of criminality. So one of the things I'm interested in then, you mentioned stores are closing and they're citing the levels of theft, they're citing, the levels of violence that they're seeing, and their concern about keeping their store associates and their employees safe. So from RILA's perspective, what is the advice to businesses that are being targeted by ORCs.
The other thing that retailers should do is collaborate, share information with their retail peers, right? Because what we're seeing more and more is ORC offenders are no longer segment agnostic. It used to be that maybe a particular ORC booster was singularly focused on a high-end apparel or health and beauty, right? Well, now they're crossing borders now. They are segment agnostic. Yeah. It all comes down to what product is in high demand out on the street, right? Or on online marketplaces. And so what we're seeing more and more is high impact offenders are hitting multiple retailers. We've got to get better as an industry to know when we have subjects in common. That brings so much added value to an investigation, to a prosecution, because it allows retailers to streamline their investigative resources. So a retailer with a very robust investigative team might be able to help support the investigation that's being led by another retailer who might not have those resources. It streamlines the investigation with law enforcement, and perhaps most importantly, it enables us to aggregate cases, put them under one roof, and have them be part of one larger case for purposes of prosecution versus a bunch of smaller cases, right, that will not lead to appropriate adjudication and deterrence of the criminal actor.
Yeah. And who is joining the dots? So are retailers, are they sharing the data themselves, or are they funneling it into police, or is it ORCAs? Who's bringing all that information together?
Yes, is my short answer. All of the above, right? Okay. So, one of the purposes of ORCAs is to enable information sharing, in a way that doesn't violate, any laws, of course. We're always mindful of that. But you've got the ORCAs. You've got, for example, RILA. At RILA, we have a Crimes Against Business Committee that meets regularly. And it is comprised of senior level executives who oversee their company's crime mitigation strategies. And so when that group gets together, they share notes on emerging crime scams, habitual offenders. I can't tell you how many times a retailer will share an overview of an investigation they're working. And then the question will be, is anybody else experiencing this? And you see all the hands go up on Zoom, right? So then they get together offline and work the investigation together. What I will also say is through vibrant communities, which I'm hoping we'll have time to talk about, and that's the initiative that RILA is leading, there is a significant information sharing component that will enable quick identification of high impact offenders who are targeting multiple retailers. So we're driving a lot of activity that enables information sharing, and certainly the ORCAs play a role in that space as well.
Tell us a little bit more about what Vibrant Communities is and how it's going to make a difference.
Yeah, so I would say overall, the objective of Vibrant Communities is to address the overall degradation of communities, quite frankly, across the country. It was, a year ago, as I said, that we launched the partnership with the National District Attorneys Association. And early on, our focus was singularly on organized retail crime. And, our objective, as I shared earlier, was to start educating prosecutors on the scope of the problem, the investigative resources that retailers have invested in this, what they can offer prosecutors in terms of evidence, et cetera. And it quickly became clear that we needed to broaden the scope of that sort of education campaign. Yeah. And by that, I mean, high impact theft offenders that might not be part of a criminal enterprise, right? So those are, the criminal actors who might be frequenting a store every day or multiple times a day. And then, stealing large quantities of merchandise and selling it at the local bodega. Yeah. Might not be labeled organized retail crime, but a high impact offender as it relates to the retailer. And what we also saw, Emmeline, and what we continue to see in the US is other activity that really is reaping havoc in stores, disrupting operations, taking store labor away from the focus, what the focus should be, making customers and employees uncomfortable. Example, the drug addicted who are self-administering narcotics in retail stores. The unhoused who are erecting shelters in retail parking lots or on property adjoining retail locations. Just really unsanitary conditions that retailers are needing to address on their property. The mentally ill, we've got a significant drug problem going on here in the US, Emmeline. And we also have a lot of mental health issues that folks are suffering from. And so because we had that partnership in place, we asked ourselves, well, why not leverage that partnership with the prosecutors to address some of these other issues as well? And out of that was born the Vibrant Communities Initiative. And so essentially what it recognizes is there is a place in jail for certain high impact offenders. If we have this, really one of the overarching objectives / metrics for success with Vibrant Communities is to reduce recidivism.
Wow, it just sounds so fantastic. And I'm so pleased that there is the emphasis on diversion, because I think that's where you will get the meaningful change, the long lasting change. When I was in the US, I found it so confronting, the range of issues that were infiltrating stores. I remember I was in Chicago and I asked to use the restroom and they said, no, we've had to close the restrooms. And I was like, oh, okay, expecting that there'd been a flood or, something like that. And they just said, because we keep having fatalities, we've got people going in there, they're overdosing. And it's, your everyday store associate that is then coming across them, finding people in the bathrooms. And I was just so shocked that this was, a weekly occurrence. And so I think to be able to recognize, there's a crisis of mental health, of homelessness, of drug addiction, of alcoholism, there's such a vast range of issues that are now finding themselves happening, occurring in stores. So something like Vibrant Communities that can begin to signpost and link these people in to actual help and support, that it's just incredible. Yeah, it's a great initiative.
Yeah, I totally agree, Emmeline. And look, we've heard of retailers installing technology in their restrooms that would essentially prevent the drug addicted from finding their veins in an effort to, stop them from self-administering narcotics in their restrooms. And then, the technology apparently might not be the best solution because it sort of spooked out the employees using the restroom. We're starting to see retailers who are building new stores build their stores with crime mitigation in mind. And so building separate restrooms for employees so that they don't have to encounter the drug addicted in their restrooms. Our safety committee, in addition to our crimes against business committee, we've got a safety committee. One of the topics that recently came up is how are they handling and disposing of fentanyl in their stores that is being administered by addicts. So, we couldn't full circle. We had to expand the scope beyond ORC to tackle some of these other really, really complex and frankly tragic challenges that folks across our country are experiencing.
So I just wanted to ask you about the Inform Consumers Act. You were heavily involved with the Buy Safe America campaign, which sort of feeds into the Inform Act. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the sort of advocacy and the campaign work that you did around Buy Safe America?
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to my amazing colleague, Michael Hansen, who oversees RILA's government relations work. And Michael, along with some of our key members, really worked so hard over the last couple of years, Emmeline, to advocate for the Inform Consumers Act and the Buy Safe coalition, which Michael and RILA stood up, was really the mechanism by which the Informed Consumers Act gained traction. Look, there is no one solution that is going to be the fix for organized retail crime, but Inform is a critical one. And we believe that it will have a significant impact. One thing we haven't talked about, Emmeline, is the role played by online marketplaces in organized retail crime. And they are a favored fence of stolen product by organized retail crime enterprises because of the autonomy with which online sellers could sell product and the lack of verified information about these sellers. And they could sit behind their computers, use fake screen names, and nobody would ever know who they are, right? And so Inform changes that. And, it's got three major components. It requires online marketplaces to collect certain information from high volume sellers, to verify that information, and to disclose certain information about a subcategory of high volume sellers. And so the autonomy will be gone, or at least addressed in some respects, right? That is a huge change for the positive, Emmeline. And one of the tools through Inform, or one of the requirements, is that a reporting mechanism must be displayed on high volume seller listings. And that enables
anybody accessing that advert then could click it in order to find out whether they are essentially buying stolen goods. It would give them, enough information to make an informed decision about that. I mean, that sounds hugely powerful. Are you hopeful that it will make the difference?
I am hopeful. Look, I'm sort of cynical by nature. And many years ago, we at RILA we brought the online marketplaces to the table to try to get them to work voluntarily with us. Like that's how we at RILA like to do things. Like, let's be partners. Let's work together to try to address this. Let's own it together. And despite our best efforts, it didn't yield any results from the online marketplaces. And so, we were left with very few options other than to try to compel them to do what we were trying to get them to do voluntarily. My hope is, online marketplaces will not, try hard to find loopholes in form, right? I mean, every time with legislation, the folks who need to abide by it are always looking for loopholes, right? And so I'm hoping that we finally have reached a boiling point of, look, it is a really bad problem. We all own it. We've got to all own it. The online marketplaces play a role in it. They should want to do whatever they can to address it, inform or no inform, right? Loophole or no loophole. The difference is that today they're going to be compelled to do it when they were not otherwise compelled to do that. What's going to be interesting, and we're already talking about it, is how the AP investigators in the retail organizations will leverage Inform to move their investigations along. So there's a lot to be learned. It's a wait and see. The Federal Trade Commission and state attorneys general in the U.S. have enforcement power, so they can go after the online marketplaces. Or at a minimum, they can seek information that will give them insight into the extent to which online marketplaces are complying.
So much interesting things taking place in the US, and thank you so much to Lisa LaBruno from RILA for sharing her insights around the Inform Act, which I'm watching with so much interest to see the impact that has and whether other countries will follow suit if it is an effective practice. I can't really see how it could not be. And vibrant communities, wow, it's incredible to see the scale of that partnership work and the real passion towards making that an effective collaboration between law enforcement, business and communities. Hopefully we'll have an update on that in the coming months. So thank you, Lisa, and thank you all for listening.